Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Politics on Channels Television. I'm Millicent Walker. On the news this hour, Supreme Court in Abuja fixes January 20 for Kano governorship election appeals as it also resumes judgment on election appeal for governors of Imo, Benue, Bauchi, Sokoto and Plateau states. President Buhari signs into law a new finance legislation as experts raise yellow flag on some contentious portions of the act. Men asked leaders to guard against the recurrence of the civil war by ensuring good governance and fairness in administration. We begin today with the Supreme Court fixing January 20th for Kano's governorship election appeal. This is after a resumption of election appeal hearing of governors of Imo, Benue, Plateau, Bauchi, Sokoto at the Apex Court in Abuja today. The appeal hearing had earlier been adjourned till today after a member of the seven-man panel was reportedly indisposed. The reconstituted seven-man panel led by Chief Justice of Nigeria, Tanko Mohammed, will decide whether or not Governor Emeka Ihedioha of Imo, Mr. Bala Mohammed of Bauchi, Abdullahi Ganduje of Kano, well, that was, of course, postponed to the 20th, but then Aminu Tambuwal of Sokoto, Mr. Simon Lalong of Plateau, and Samuel Otom of Benue were duly elected. Let's go over now to our correspondent, Linda Akigbe, who's monitoring the proceedings for us at the Supreme Court, and she's at the venue. Hello, Linda. What more can you tell us about today's proceedings?
Okay, hello, Millicent. Now, the Supreme Court is to deliver judgment for the Kano State governorship appeal on January 20th. This decision was announced some minutes ago at the resumed sitting of the Supreme Court to determine the governorship election appeals from Sokoto, Kano, Bauchi, Benue and Plateau states. The court was unable to hear the appeals yesterday and adjourned because one member of the seven-man panel took ill. Now, today, a reconstituted seven-man panel headed by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Ibrahim Mohammed, is presently in session and hearing the appeals. The court had earlier heard the appeal filed by Abba Yusuf of the PDP against the Kano State Governor Abdullahi Ganduje and INEC, as well as the ruling APC. Now, lawyer to the appellant is urging the court to allow the appeal, including setting aside the order of the lower court and grant all the prayers of the appellant. He argued that the returning officer of Kano State, that INEC returning officer, unilaterally cancelled results from 207 polling units, and that action is null and void. However, the lawyer representing INEC, Mr. Ahmed Raji, asked the court to dismiss the appeal, arguing that it is not true that the returning officer cancelled the results of the 207 polling units, and he maintained that there is no evidence whatsoever to prove that the returning officer did in fact cancel the results. Now, the lawyer to Governor Ganduje has aligned with these submissions by INEC. Like I said earlier, the judgment will be delivered on January 20th. At the moment, the court is hearing the appeals from Sokoto and Imo states. We'll bring you more details in subsequent bulletins. Back to you, Millicent.
All right, thank you, Linda, for that update. 50 years ago, precisely January 1970, the last shot was fired in the Nigerian Civil War, effectively ending the conflict. But it had claimed about 3 million casualties, leaving behind devastation and starvation amidst the ruins of strife. Those memories are still very much on the minds of many who experienced the war firsthand. To commemorate the end of that war, some groups put together a conference tagged Never Again, the Nigerian Civil War, 50 years after. Our correspondent Sheon Kibaloye has a report.
You can feel it in the room that it will be a day of letting off the steam and the sad memories of the Nigerian Civil War.
The aim is to sensitize Nigerians.
As the organizers set the ball rolling, the expressions were on the loose. The intellectuals who were keynote speakers were frank and pointed.
That leadership, on whichever side, is about to repeat, yet again, the ultimate folly of sacrificing 2.5 million lives on the altar of absolutes, any absolute whatsoever. We should borrow that African-American credo, paint them on prayer scrolls, flood the skies in their millions with kites bearing that inscription, and balloons that read very simply, African lives matter.
Critical question is, why does Nigeria wobble so badly in spite of experience that should be driving it forward, and what can be done about it? I think we can list reasons to include one, a mistaken view that Nigeria is about how much you can extract from the national cake. A cake to eat makes poor tomorrow, but producing makes rich always. There is a duty that each and every one of us has. It is the duty to believe that it can be different, and that if we can dream it, we can make it happen.
The fear for most of those who experienced the carnage and the devastation of the late 1960s, which climaxed into the end of the war in 1970, is that such a human-made disaster should never replay itself again.
Nigerians have to reflect on the road we have passed. For example, the proposition can be made that we went to war because there was a failure of leadership. And in saying that, I will remind us that the three regions were really doing very well. We are already in a crisis. If we, in our sober deference to reality, find that we can no longer hold together as one country, then let us together peacefully find a rational solution. And let us never again plunge into any kind of war among us.
After the speeches comes a panel discussion and emotions flow freely.
Very personal to many of us. Very sensitive matter.
60% of the fighting forces in Biafra were team where I come from. Why did you drag us into that war?
It was a reality check for Nigeria and its people that the polity has a slender body which needs to be properly managed, and stern warning coming from the elderly in the room that the horrors of the Civil War should never again repeat itself. Sheon Kibaloye reporting for Channels Television News.
To other stories, President Muhammadu Buhari has signed the 2019 Finance Bill into law following its passage by the 9th National Assembly. The bill, which was introduced alongside the 2020 budget, aims to reform Nigeria's tax laws to align with global best practices and support micro, small and medium enterprises. It also seeks to incentivize investment in infrastructure and capital markets, as well as raise government revenues. It's the first time since Nigeria's return to democracy that a federal budget is being accompanied by the passage of the finance bill specially designed to create an enabling environment for businesses and investments by the private sector. The signing of the bill has been commended by economists, policymakers, and financial market operators in the country. Well, for more on the implications of the new finance law to Nigerians, the Director of Tax Policy, Federal Inland Revenue Service, FRS, Mr. Gabriel Ogujemilusi, joins us from Abuja. And we have Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy and Partner, West Africa Tax Lead at PricewaterhouseCoopers. He joins us via Skype from Victoria Island. Welcome both of you to the program. Let's start with you, Mr. Ogujemilusi. The 7.5% VAT, it's trending right now. Can you explain to Nigerians that this does not mean they'll spend more, or that this administration has their actually has their best interests at heart?
Thank you. The increase of VAT rate to 7.5% literally means that one needs to pay more for items bought. But in relative terms, when you look at it, the law has taken care of certain sectors by having a threshold of turnover below 25 million not to be VATable persons. That is, they are not going to invoice VAT. So anyone that consumes services or goods from such enterprises or companies would literally not pay VAT. That means it's going to be at zero rate. But for companies having turnover above 25 million, any consumption of their goods or services will be subjected to VAT at 7.5%. And the general masses that are below, maybe low-income earner, will definitely not be subjected to VAT at all, which is different from what we had before. Before, irrespective of your status, if you consume goods and services, you pay 5%. But this has definitely taken that away by allowing individuals or enterprises that consume services or goods from companies that are below the threshold not to pay any VAT.
Looking at the 7.5% VAT, and that's the increase now, it's been quoted that the FRS has said that Nigeria will earn about 2.08 trillion naira in terms of projection. Can you confirm this and tell us how much indeed can we be assured of greater revenue, especially in terms of accountability, how this can be plugged back in to the federal government, states, and the local government?
Thank you. By projection, it is expected that it will yield additional maybe in totality of 2.1 trillion. Let's say last year, I think we made like 1.1 trillion at 5%. So if you look at it critically, if you have 50% increase, you may be thinking of having 1.7 trillion, but with restructuring the FRS and also expanding the tax base, we are likely going to move up to above 2 trillion in our projection. I think the budget for this year is looking at 2.2 trillion. So it's possible that we can achieve it. And as a deployment, that means there will be more money available to states and local governments. And because the state and local government, arms of government have more share of the value-added tax.
Let's quickly go to Mr. Taiwo.
Only 50% of.
Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy Partner, West Africa Tax Lead, PwC. Thank you for joining us. Looking at the 7.5% VAT, can you honestly say that this won't be a burden on the people, especially those at the very bottom of the pyramid?
Yes, I think for the people at the bottom of the pyramid, what the finance bill has done, which is now a finance act, is to try and exempt the things they need to consume in terms of basic food item, from cereal to meat to fish and vegetable as well as education, tuition for their kids all the way to university, Medicare, all those are exempted from VAT, so they will not bear the brunt of the 7.5% increase. But we have to also note that, even people at the bottom of the pyramid, we have to make phone calls. So they will top up their phones and pay for recharge cards. And this will now attract a higher VAT rate. To some extent as well, electricity tariff bears VAT. When you consume financial services from your bank, most of those charges get into customers' account also attract VAT. So it's almost impossible to completely eliminate the impact of the VAT increase, even on the people below the bottom of the ladder. But I do think that we need to commend government for being deliberate in trying to reduce that burden as much as possible on the poor.
All right, gentlemen, we'll come back to continue this discussion. We need to go on a short break. Still to come on the program as well, Senator Shehu Sani will tell you about the alleged extortion investigation. Join us again. Welcome back to the program. But first, to some of our stories in brief. We begin with the Bayelsa State government appealing the judgment of the Federal High Court Abuja, which ceded the disputed oil wells between Rivers and Bayelsa State. Now, the Solicitor General of Bayelsa State, Mr. Priya Agada, who led the state's legal team to file the appeal on behalf of the state's Attorney General, said that the state is seeking a stay of execution of the judgment delivered by Justice Eyang Ekwo, pending the resolution on the matter. Mr. Agada said that the lower court delivered judgment against the state without joining it as a party in the suit. Elsewhere, Ekiti State Governor Dr. Kaide Fayemi has flagged off the reconstruction and repair of 4 strategic roads linking some 7 local government areas to the state. The road links some revenue and industrial hubs in the state, including the Kogosi Warm Spring Resort, Ikundari Dairy Farms, and the Burnt Bricks Industry, among others. The work expected to be delivered in 12 months is described by the governor as a fulfillment of promises to the people and a good move towards job creation and revenue generation. We've been talking about the implications of the new finance law, and our guests have been discussing that with us. Here are a few highlights of the law signed by the president. One is the value-added tax from 5% is now increased to 7.5%. Companies with turnover of less than 25 million naira will no longer pay company income tax. Other issues like new laws removes the tax exemption on dividends paid from the profit of oil companies. The stamp duty threshold to be charged on online transactions has now been raised from 10,000, which used to be at 1,000 naira. Bank transfers less than 10,000 naira will not be subject to stamp duty again. And several other new laws amended a number of existing laws to include the Customs and Excise Tariff Act, Stamp Duties Act, the Capital Gains Act, to mention a few. I just want to come back to what our last guest, and that's Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, you talked about how it's impossible in terms of eliminating the poor from the increase of VAT, and some of the examples you've given, like the phone calls or the electricity tariff. And if I were to take your comments to our guest, Mr. Ogujemilusi, the president and the federal governments, they've talked about eliminating poverty, creating more infrastructure. But when you look at the finance bill as a whole, does this do that, the set objectives of ensuring that 100 million are lifted out of poverty in 10 years, or does it make things worse for the people?
Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, if definitely is the focus of the government to lift the people, 100 million people out of the poverty level is still on focus, on course, and the increase in VAT would definitely not affect that in any means, because as I said earlier, yes, if you consume most of the items consumed by the low-level income earners are majorly from companies that are below the threshold. That's number one. Where one now consumes something like phone charges, which is one of the things that is now common to, which is part of what to lift people out of the poverty. If you look at the consumption of the low-income earners and phone calls and all those, they are very minimal, and very minimal to the extent that the effect of 2.5% may not be that significant on their income. Whereas the consumer, the main consumer of these items, services like phone calls, that is the people on the high income level. And definitely they spend more on phone calls in a month, in up to 100,000 to some people, while the low-income madam is spend less than, maybe less than 2,000 naira in a month. And the effect of 2.5% increase the VAT will not be that much on them. So it may not have direct impact in affecting the government focus of lifting 100 million people from poverty.
Mr. Oyedele, if I may quickly bring you in, let me quickly get your overall view of the finance law and how it affects Nigeria, looking also at global best practices, and if this is the best thing for us as a country.
Yes, indeed. One of the objectives of the Finance Act is to try and modernize Nigeria's tax system, in addition to raising revenue, protecting the poor, MSME, and the rest of it. Overall, I do think that the Finance Act would accomplish those objectives if you bear in mind that the majority of our people even live below the poverty line. So 7.5% VAT is not going to significantly affect them because they do not consume most of the items that are liable to VAT. If you also think about the stamp duty, single transaction now at 10,000, these poor people don't do single transactions at 10,000. So, and I think also protecting MSMEs, we have over 40 million of them according to the MBS. And these 40 million, more than 90% of them are below the threshold of 25 million turnover in a year. So which means not only do they not need to charge VAT, also bear in mind that majority of their customers are also people in the lower end of the society's ladder. They don't have to charge them VAT anymore, and they don't have to pay CIT when they file their returns. So I'll say overall, it has been well thought through to indeed protect the poor and the vulnerable. But I do need to mention that this law has not come into effect yet because it has not been published in the Gazette. So which means as we speak now, VAT continues to be 5%. Until such a time when the law is gazetted.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you. We appreciate your time. The Director Tax Policy, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Mr. Gabriel Ogunje Milusi, and also Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy Partner, West Africa Tax at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you very much for your time. A coalition of civil rights organizations in Abuja is asking the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, to go beyond the arrest of Senator Shehu Sani in an alleged bribery scandal and investigate the role played by all actors in the matter. The spokesperson of the group, Mr. Adamu Mutazu, insists both the giver and taker of the alleged bribe should be investigated.
What we are calling on the anti-graft agencies to do is that both the bribe giver and the bribe taker are corrupt and should be punished according to the law of the land, because there cannot be only one party, a bribe taker alone. There must be somebody who gives the bribe too. He too should be punished according to the law.
Now, over 2 trillion naira has been set aside by the federal government for the provision of infrastructure across the country. This was confirmed by the Vice President, Professor Umeshi Bajo, while commissioning some roads and other projects in Kano. He acknowledged that the road projects will assist businesses and vehicular movement across the state and the northern region.
Is to commission.
We've invested almost 2.7 trillion naira on capital alone, which is the highest in the history of the country, despite the fact that we're earning almost 60% less than previous governments. So there is no question at all that for President Muhammadu Buhari, infrastructure is key.
That's the show this afternoon. Many thanks for watching. I'm Millicent Nwoka. Don't forget to join the discussion via social media platforms and watch our YouTube channel /channelsweb for more updates.